Hi, this is Dave Carr with the WordPress for Toastmasters project. One of the people who's been a great supporter of this project over the years told me the other day that one of her basic frustrations was that she didn't like working with blocks. Blocks are a fundamental concept in the WordPress editor, and so this is a tutorial just about blocks and how to work with blocks. Now, by block, I just mean a content block, a specific type of content within the editor. So if I go into this post and edit it, if I click on the first paragraph, well, I get a paragraph block. And I can tell that it's a paragraph block because over on the right-hand margin, there are some controls with properties of that block. Now, actually, I should explain that in some views, you might open this up and not see that. So there is sort of a show hide on this little button up here, this little settings button. So these are the settings for my block. I can change the paragraph to have a bigger font or to have a different colored text or a different colored background. So these are all things that are basic to many different types of blocks. But every block can have its own different sort of content controls. So when I click on the block that represents my YouTube video, well, it has a couple of options. It doesn't have all those things related to fonts and background colors because those aren't as relevant for a video. That's the basic concept is if I go through here, most of these are paragraph blocks. So when I first open it up, I've got a little blinking cursor waiting for me, asking me to add a title. And the title, the way it's set up, is actually a special area of the editor. It is not a block per se. But once I hit enter, I go down to the first line, and by default, it gives me a paragraph block. So this is my introduction. And as I showed you before, there are controls that would allow me to change the font size or the background or the font color. But if you're writing an essay, if you're writing up a report on a recent meeting, or you're writing recommendations on how to be a good mentor, you might want to just come here and just write. And maybe within that writing, to organize it a little bit better, you might want to add some headings. So to add a different kind of content block, a heading, an image, or if I go into the agenda editor, it can be things like a placeholder for a role. Well, there are these buttons here, these little plus buttons. There's one in the upper left-hand corner. There's one in the context of where I'm working. And I can click here and select whatever it is I need. Heading is a pretty common choice. So this is the second most important thing. Because the most important thing that should be the title of your post. But you can put in a heading, some more text here, and then maybe another heading that's a level 3 instead of a level 2. So I go in here and change this right here. Now these little floating button bars pop up. Now they're different depending on what block you've created, but there's always some little floating bar there that gives you some options, even if it's only to allow you to see what kind of content that you're working with. And we see I could convert this. I could say, no, this doesn't need to be a heading. This just needs to be a paragraph. It could be a list item. It could be a few other things. And specific to headings, we have these levels. H1, H2, H3, H4, and so on. Now typically the H1, the top level heading on an article, is what you put right here at the top. So that's the most important thing. So think of this as sort of an outline of your page. And one of the reasons you do this is to organize the page better for the reader, organize the article better for the reader, but also organize it better for the search engines, so that when they're coming through and scraping the site, they can see sort of this outline of, oh, here's the most important thing, and here's the second most important thing, because they associated that with a heading level 2. And you can do better in your search engine rankings by building keywords that people might be searching on into the headlines of these things. So if this was an article about mentorship, your title could be just, how to be a better mentor. And then maybe a subheading in here is something like that. And so now we have a subheading and a heading that identify two of the most important topics that we're going to be talking about, is mentors and mentees. So you don't have to go crazy with search engine optimization to rank a little bit better, particularly if you have something great to say and other people might link to it as a source of authority. So you're going through working on your article and you decide you want to add an image. So again, image is just another content block. And we can see a bunch of choices here. We can also search. If I put in the word image, it'll actually tell me that I could also have a cover image, which is a larger image. We could have an image compare where we show two images side by side to compare and contrast. We can insert a whole image gallery. We'll just stick to a basic image here. And I can go into my media library and I can pick some image that I've used previously. Or when I'm adding an image, I can, of course, upload it from my computer. Now I'm going to get into some of the tricky parts in just a moment. So we put these things on the page and then we realize that they're in the wrong order. So how do we move them around? Well, there are these up and down arrows. Those are one of the easiest ways of doing that. So you can move things up and down the page. Now there is also drag and drop, but to drag and drop, I wouldn't just click on the image. There's this little handle here that says drag, and that allows me to drag this down here. So that's how you do drag and drop in the WordPress editor. Now, again, the sidebar has changed of my different options. So we have the options of how big should the image be. Should it be full size or should it be a little thumbnail version? Sometimes there are other choices. It depends partly on the size of the original image that was uploaded, but this one has a medium size option. And if I make it medium size, I can also maybe make it a line over to the right of some of my text, or I can decide that it needs to be centered. So again, these options are different depending on what kind of content I'm dealing with. If I wanted that option to have a link associated with it, so anybody who clicks on the image goes to that link, I can click here and I can select, say, oh, here we go. All right, media file is one of the options, but I can also put in any other address. And now when somebody clicks on that image, they're going to be taken to that page. For a link, we have a couple of other options here. Probably the most important one is when they click there, is the page that they were on going to disappear and a new one's going to be loaded, or does it open in a new browser tab? So if you want it to open in a new browser tab, you would click here. There's some properties associated with that link. One other thing that does get maybe a little bit tricky is, it's easy when you're just typing text to just hit enter and go to the next line. But when you have two image blocks side by side with each other, how do you open up space to be able to add something else? Well, there's this little menu right here. So every block has this menu associated with it, and I think the options are almost always the same. They are to copy this, to duplicate it, to insert before, so that would be insert a blank line before, or I can insert a blank line after. And so that gives me a space I can type, or I can add some other type of block. Maybe I want to add another image in that space. Edit as HTML, again, that would be for the power users, the people who have some HTML skills, but I can actually see the HTML behind this image and modify it at that level if I really want to. Again, something that most of you won't want to mess with or need to mess with. Let's see. Now let's talk for a moment about the agenda and how this is set up. And at least if you're on a recent Toastmasters site, you will have this block up top. The only reason it exists is to include a little bit of documentation and tell you where to find more help. So if you click on the How to Edit the Agenda block, you'll get some other instructions about how to do the rest of this stuff. Now the main blocks that you work with in an agenda are notes and roles. This is the online presenters agenda. Maybe I should get out of here in just a minute so that I don't mess it up permanently. But I can do the same thing here. If I want to rearrange the roles, I have the up and down control. I do have the drag and drop if I wanted to put Toastmaster of the Day at the end of the meeting rather than the beginning. I could do that. I don't really want to do that, so I'll put it back where it was. All right. Within the role block, we have controls over here for the type of role. The number or the count is specifically for speakers and evaluators where you want to have more than one speaker slot. So you can do these things a number of different ways. If I decided that I didn't want to have a Toastmaster of the Day, I could go down to remove that role. If it was me, I would remove the counter, but that's just me. And we also do have the editable note, where the idea is we're just going to put in a label and we're going to allow people to edit that on the front end. And I find this useful for things like the meeting theme and the word of the day. So if I go out and view these on the website, if I come out to view the agenda on the website, and I'm a member of this site, I'll see these editable notes up top, and I can click to modify this to be whatever it needs to be. So as VP of Education, I choose the word of the day and the theme, at least as a starter one. Sometimes the Toastmaster of the Day might want to change that, but I'll put a placeholder in there. If we're going to have an induction of new members, we can add a note on the agenda. And then we have our roles that people can sign up for and roles that, fortunately, people have already taken. This is for a week, a couple of weeks in advance. And we already have some speakers signed up, so that's good. So again, a block just represents a different type of content. And there are lots of different blocks. There are even these things called patterns where you can pull in whole sets of blocks that have been organized into designs that might be appropriate for laying out your home page in a more interesting way. We can take a look at this one where it has a whole outline of a layout, and you can go through here and replace the text, replace the images, but use that basic design pattern of a set of blocks that have already been laid out for you by a professional designer. Now, there are actually a lot of different blocks that you can use. I tend to use heading, paragraph, and image. and video. That's usually about it. Occasionally I will use some layout blocks like columns. So columns are useful for showing things side by side. So I can decide whether I want a 2-column or 3-column layout. And one of the cool things about it is these are designed so that if the page is being viewed on a mobile phone and there's not room for the columns to be displayed side by side, well, then they'll be displayed one after the other. So the WordPress developers have thought through a lot of these issues, and you can take advantage of what they've learned to format your content so it's attractive on the website, but is also going to adapt well to mobile. So that's cool. Well, let's see. I always want to show people the concept of you can just copy and paste to insert the video block. So copy and paste from YouTube or Vimeo or any one of several other services. Just paste it into the page. It automatically adds it as a block. Because of course, I could, of course, search for the video block. But one other useful one that you might take advantage of is the file block. So this works very similarly to uploading an image. I can instead upload a PDF. So this is my IRS exemption letter. Actually, it's the master one for Toastmasters International as an organization from back in 1962. If I wanted to have this on my website, I can upload that. It does give me a little preview of it, and I can make this a little bit clearer. So this is Toastmasters non-profit status, IRS. So I'll give it a little bit clearer label, and there will be a download button next to it. And so when I publish this to the website, we will see our 2-column layout with a couple of images, a video, and the preview of this PDF with a button that allows me to download it. So these are all things that you can get by working with blocks. Maybe a different concept, a different thing than you're used to from working with a word processor like Microsoft Word, but it's powerful. It allows you to use multimedia elements such as images and video. It's very flexible. A little bit of a learning curve maybe, but worth the trip.